Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Bad Paramahansa Bhagavad-gita Ashtotar Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Bhagavad-gita Ashtotar Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, we're on page 669 today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 28th day of July, 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 18, the conclusion, the perfection of renunciation, text number 12, bottom of page, well, top of page 669. Anishtam ishtam ishtam cha. Trivadam karmanakpalam bhavatyathyaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit anishtam mishram cha trivadam karmanakpalam bhavatyathyaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit anishtam mishram cha trivadham karmanakpalam bhavatyathyaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit anishtam mishram cha trivadham karmanakpalam bhavatyathyaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit anishtam mishram cha trivadham karmanakpalam Bhavatya Tyaginam Pretya Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit Anishtamishtam Mishram Cha Tribadham Manakpalam Bhavatya Tyaginam Pretya Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. You're on, Prabhu. Anishtamishtam Mishram Cha Tribadham Karmanakpalam Bhavatya Tyaginam Pretya Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Head. Mask. Sorry. Okay, Anishtam leading to hell. Wow. Anishtam leading to hell. Ishtam leading to heaven. Mishram mixed. Cha and Tribadham of three kinds. Karmanaha of work. Palam the result. Bhavati comes. Atyaginam for those who are not renounced. Pretya after death. Na, not to, but Sannyasinam for the renounced order. Kvachit at any time. Translation. For one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness acting in knowledge of his relationship with Krishna is always liberated. Therefore he does not have to enjoy or suffer the results of his acts after death. All right, we'll read one more. Panchaitani Mahabahu Karanani Nabodame Sankye Kvatante Proktani Siddhaye Sarvakarmanam. Almighty Amnarjun, according to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these from me. Purport. A question may be raised that since any activity performed must have some reaction, how is it that the person in Krishna consciousness does not suffer or enjoy the reactions of work? The Lord is citing Vedanta philosophy to show how this is possible. He says that there are 5 causes for all activities, and for success in all activity, one should consider these 5 causes. Sankhya means the stock of all knowledge. Now this was changed. Not the stock of all knowledge. It's, I think it means the dissertation. It means the dissertations. Wasn't stock. What was it? I'm sorry, but it's the repository of all knowledge. And Vedanta is the final repository of all knowledge accepted by all leading acharyas. Even Shankara accepts Vedanta Sutra as such. Therefore, such authority should be consulted. The ultimate control is invested in the Supersoul. As it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya Chaham Vidisannavishta. He is engaging everyone in certain activities by reminding him of his past actions. And Krishna-conscious acts done under his direction from within yield no reaction, either in this life or in the life after death. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, there's quite a bit of the Bhagavad Gita that deals with the idea of breaking free from the bonds of reactions, karmic reactions. You'll find, of course, in chapter 3, which is entitled Karma Yoga, there's much of that. We'll find in that chapter, Yagyartat Kamanon Yatra Loko Yam Karma Bandhana Tadatam Kama Kodi Mukta Sangha Samachara, which means that acts, whatever you do, has to be performed as an act of sacrifice for the benefit of the Lord. In fact, there Prabhupada reveals that the very word yajna also means Vishnu. So if you're doing everything for Vishnu, and you're not coveting any of the fruits, then there's no reaction to that work. That's the idea. And it's very starkly illustrated here in the Bhagavad Gita itself, where Arjuna was deathly afraid of the reaction, and that he would be the cause of a huge amount of suffering. Remember, part of his argument was, well, not only am I going to see that, be participating in the death of my beloved grandfather Bhishma, and who helped to raise them when Pandu died, and my beloved teacher Dronacharya, but all these relatives and friends, and even there's this whole interesting thing that goes on with the word, the relationship of cousins. Prabhupada uses this term in his dictation and typing of cousin brothers, and sometimes they just forget the cousins, and it's the brothers, and so it gets kind of confusing because he's got his real brothers on the battlefield with the rest of the Pandavas. And, Arjuna didn't want to fight with his brothers, meaning he didn't want to fight with the sons of Dhritarashtra, And why is that? Because in the Vedic culture, and I looked at the Sanskrit even, and it became interesting when we're dealing with Kamsa and Devaki and that whole scene at the beginning of the 10th canto where the marriage is taking place, and Kamsa takes the reins of his sister's chariot and is driving, and then this oracle comes, the 8th child, the word is child, not son, the word child of this lady will kill you. And that changes everything. He's ready to kill his own sister. But when you look at the relationship, well, it's pretty simple. Devaka and Ugrasen were brothers. Devaka's daughter is Devaki, and Ugrasen's son is Kamsa. So they're straight-on cousins. But it just, and in the very Sanskrit, the word swastra is used, which is the Sanskrit for sister. And so this whole thing is there. And so Arjuna was, looking the whole thing from a material point of view, but also a dharmic point of view, from the Vedas, from the Karmakanda section of the Vedas. And he just said, there's just no percentage in this. Even if I win the kingdom, but it is soaked with the blood of my friends and relatives, and I can't bear to live without the sons of the Dhritarashtra. Which is really a remarkable statement, seeing as how they tried to kill him and his brothers repeatedly. Anyway, so he goes through this whole thing, and then finally, at the end of the first chapter, he says, beginning of the second chapter, again he reiterates, I shall not fight. He says to Govinda, I shall not fight. But he's not satisfied, because he's torn, because he knows his duty is to fight, and so he surrenders to Krishna as a disciple rather than a friend, and then the whole conversation changes. Krishna chastises him and he gives the instruction of the Gita. So much of the instruction is there in the early chapters, especially how to work in such a way that you're not going to accrue any karmic reaction, good or bad. And of course, it has to be the fruits of the action have to be given to yajna, given to Krishna. And then that neutralizes any reaction. And that's why it's often said, you don't engage in any activities. Remember in the 12th chapter, he doesn't have any endeavors. Means, not that you don't do anything, but that whatever you're doing, the impetus is coming from above. It's coming from Krishna through the Guru and so forth. Just like when, living in the ashram. Well, there's so many things that you're supposed to do. And if you have some, activity, there's certainly a leeway for creativity, like cooking, But the idea of cooking and who you're cooking for and what the result is, it's not something you came up with. That was given to you, and you're working within that paradigm to add your intelligence and skill and devotion to it. So that's what it means that you're not the doer anymore. You're not an independent doer, because as soon as you do something on your own, then you're responsible for it, and you're going to get a reaction, good or bad. I'm listening to these early lectures. There's a whole, Prabhupada's lectures, his classes, they go through like eras, you can hear. And these are like the ones in 26nd Avenue. And there's a certain flavor there. Prabhupada he's so excited, he's got this audience now and he's just pouring it out and he doesn't have to mitigate his words, in Dr. Mishra's ashram, what is he going to think, But so much of it is encouraging. No, it's not just meditation, it's action, it's activities, the senses are engaged. And he uses this word consciousness. We are pure consciousness, and we have to engage in the service of the pure consciousness. And I can't help think that part of that is because he comes into this milieu in which there's cosmic consciousness and everyone is concerned with the LSD. In other words, the consciousness is in the air. That word is in the air, and Prabhupada is utilizing it because it's apparently. So the idea here is that, as we read, Anishta Mishna Mishram Cha, which I love that line, Anishta Mishna Mishram, so poetic. So Anishtam leading to hell, Ishtam leading to heaven, or Mishram. So if you're just acting normally, even within the Vedic culture, trying to do good works and avoid bad things bad karma, then it's all a big mix, and either way you're responsible. If you perform good acts, then you build up some good karma. You get it back in this next life on this plane, or you maybe go to a heavenly planet one way or another. Or if you do evil works, then you're headed for a lot of suffering. So it all accrues, unless you're truly renounced, in which karmanak palam. If you're working for the fruits, for the result, if your motivation is to enjoy the results of the activity. So this is the atyaginam. Those who have not renounced, they haven't renounced the fruits. They haven't renounced the whole enterprise of making a plan and trying to enjoy a better material position in the future. Now that's the whole idea. So they're certainly not sannyasis. So now he's going to show this. There's these 5 factors of action, and it's very interesting because one of them is the karta. The karta is the worker, literally the doer. But then there's this whole thing. If you remember the 3rd chapter, Prabhupada quoted this verse all the time. Prakate kiyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma karta hamiti manyate. That everything is actually being done by nature. Even the activities that we do, well, our body is part of nature. We may have a desire, but it's being fulfilled by material nature under the supervision of the super soul and all the gods and everything. And so I just want to lift this cup and drink some water. I don't know how that's going on. I'm not like, okay, send the message down to the muscles and put. I just want to get the water, and automatically it happens. The nature is doing it. It's being fulfilled that way. But the one who is bewildered by the false ego thinks that you're doing everything. I'm the cause of everything. And therefore I have this independence, where actually we have no independence. We're completely dependent on higher powers, material energy, and those who are controlling it, and ultimately Krishna. So the whole trick here is analyzing who the causes are, and one of the causes, of course, is the super soul. And there's the senses, the doer, the karta, the active, but the overseer of the whole enterprise is the super soul. And when the whole point is, when we dovetail our activities with the desires of the super soul, who's Krishna, then there's no reaction. And that's how you step into the whole, as Prabhupada mentioned this famous line, on the threshold of the house of bhakti. Because the end of the whole thing, of bhakti, is to make all your motivation wholly and solely simply to please Krishna. Now, how can that be, unless you love him? Just like a mother's focus, on the helpless little baby. It's like everything she does has to be, is it okay for the baby? Is it going to be good for the child? There's so much focus on there. And because there's this love, it's not like, well, what can I get out of it? You don't get anything out of it. You get out of it that you see your child is happy and healthy, and that's it. So when Prabhupada said that's the purest example of love in the material world, selfless love. But when you expand that into Krishna consciousness, it's like what Krishna is giving you impetuses for work. Like he says, Patram Prasham Palam Toyam. Okay, offer me these simple little items with bhakti, and I'll accept it. And if I accept it, then that's to your ultimate benefit. You're purifying your heart of this false motivation, reflection of love, which is in relation to the material world, and you're directing it back toward the one who can properly reciprocate it. And you know, the simple act of doing anything for Krishna is so valuable, especially if you're conscious of it. Even if you're unconscious of it, agyata sukriti, that accrues, and you know, in this life or the next, you come into a touch with a devotee and you're interested, as opposed to being, are you kidding me? I got stuff to do. You know what I mean? That little change of interest is all that makes all the difference in the world. Because then you can hear or read or get, you know, more interested and be attracted. So now we're going to study these 5 factors in action, and we're going to see how understanding how that works is kind of foundational for you know, progressing in devotional service. Okay, should we go on? All right. Text 14. Adishtanam tata karta karanam chapadag vidham vividhas chapatak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. The place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. That performer is the karta. Purport. The word adishtanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti. Eshahi drashta, srashta, the Prashna Upanishad 4:9. Drashta is the seer and srashta is the doer. It is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra by the verses Gyota Eva, verses or aphorisms. Gyota Eva 2.3.18 and Karta Shastrartavatvat 2.3.33. The instruments of action are the senses, and by the senses the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the Supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is the super cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Supersoul, situated within the heart, is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the Supreme Will, the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is really, you know, the essence of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and that is that our whole, you know, what we've built up in this material world, all of this relationships and the buildings and the paraphernalia, our own particular life, you know, ordinary life with the relationships and things like that. It's all just it's like a dream. It's like a dream, meaning that it's temporary, and all the things that you see are so absolutely, you know, essential and important in my life and in, you know, in my relationship with society as a whole. You know, I've got all these things going on. It ultimately comes to nothing. I mean, you die, you know, and you leave the body here. Then, you know, your bank account has a name on it. It's the name of your body, so this bank account is staying. And all the relationships you made are ultimately forgotten. Just like, can anyone here remember their last birth and who their parents were and the children and where, you know? But at that, we were in a last birth, right? And we thought at the time, those are very important. This is who I am, right? But it's not who you are. So understanding you know, how this action takes place, then the question is, well, okay, what should I work for? What should be my motivation to do anything? And that's where the Supersoul comes in, and the books of knowledge, which are really the Supersoul speaking to us. I think we made this point before, as that, you know, how is the Supersoul our friend? Well, number one, he's making it possible for us to do anything here. He's giving us the intelligence so we can act and work, and helping us to fulfill our previous unfulfilled desires, which is what we wanted, you know. In other words, he has his own instruction that he's willing to give us for our benefit, but we don't want to hear it. So we have to go through. We have to learn so many lessons. And to learn those lessons, we need to work fruitively and go through suffering and everything we've been going through for so many millions of births. He's been with us. Right? Krishna is always with us as the super soul, providing the intelligence. But the super soul actually becomes happy with us when we turn to him. The old two birds in the tree analogy. It's not just in the Upanishads, it's also in the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto. And, you got these two birds in the tree. The tree is the body, and the tree has all these fruits, which are sense gratification, different obviously. And one bird, the individual soul, is trying to enjoy those fruits. It's similar to what we read at the beginning of the 15th chapter with the banyan tree, with all those, we're going from place to place in the banyan tree, trying to enjoy, but we just stay entangled until we cut it off with the weapon of detachment. Yeah, the sword of detachment. But that's not the end of it. This whole chapter is about detachment, right? It's the perfection of enunciation, sannyas and tyaga, giving up. But giving up the things is less important than giving up the attraction for them. That's vairagya. That's really what we're looking for. And if you're really a vairagya, you'll be a natural sannyasi, even if you don't have the dress. That's the whole idea. So, for millions of births, so many different situations, different species, different planets, we've been in this illusion of here I am, Indra, or someone on that level. I got so much power and I can enjoy so much. Yes, I believe in God, but I have my own power. And but eventually that illusion comes to an end, and who knows what happens next? If you don't go back to God, Indra always seems to be getting into trouble. But he's an important devotee, But in a more ordinary way, here on Earth or an earthly planet, you're in one situation after another, and you completely identify with it. And so, cutting through the illusion of that is like a major step in enlightenment. And I think that's what happened when Prabhupada came, because frankly, all of the hallucinogens that were going on, and the sense of reality, of the ordinary humdrum reality, was already shaken by that. Whatever craziness was going on, it definitely shook up your sense of that the only thing that's happening is just, Levittown. Remember that? I lived near Levittown. Yeah, on Long Island. I grew up about, 5 minutes from Levittown. And Levittown was a post-war development in the suburbs. And, ticky-tacky, all of the houses almost the same, a little different color paint, whatever, And the kids who grow up there, which is my generation, we didn't want to just do that, That wasn't like, those who came back from the war probably didn't, okay, let's just settle down, and get the GI Bill, and, but the children of the veterans wanted something different. And meanwhile, you had all these, the Beat generation, and all of this poetry going on, and marijuana, and of course LSD was a big thing. And but you had no guidance, so it was really a lot of confusion and suffering eventually. But in the meanwhile, the sense that this is all there is was being shaken, and that opened up a whole channel to Eastern philosophy, and it's this whole other worlds and states of consciousness and all that kind of thing. And so in the middle of this, Prabhupada comes and gives the real truth, which is that yes, there is another world, but it's not something that you can reach by some drug or something like that. You have to work for it. You have to reform your consciousness, purify your consciousness of the desires and the what we call anartas, which keep you bound here, which make it seem so real and so important, And so what we're learning now of analyzing just how activity goes on, because that's what life is, doing this, doing that, and getting the result. And how we can, we'll continue to be the karta in the sense we're going to do things, but we'll know that we're not the ultimate doer. And we're responding to the indications for how to act and why to act from the higher source. And that in that way linking us up, and that's the beginning of bhakti, is serving, not your senses, serving not the demands of lust and anger and all these things, but serving the higher will, which ultimately, and this is so important to have faith, is our best friend. He has our best interest in mind. And this is why people are so disturbed, because those who are in charge of this world, we don't have trust that they really have our best interests in mind. There's all this exploitation and lying going on, which completely undermines any kind of society. Whereas here we have faith. This is the truth. Krishna has nothing to gain from this. He came down here for our benefit. He's happy, and of course he continues to enjoy in the spiritual world. But he takes the trouble to come down because he's our eternal friend. He never forgets us. And Father, Father is always thinking, when will the boy come back? I want to help him, like that. So that's what he's continuing now, and he's winding up his instruction, and it kind of builds up to a big crescendo at the end of the chapter. We get all these essential instructions. All right, sorry to hold forth like that, but I think it's worthy of emphasizing the essential nature of this knowledge. All right, let's go on. Sharira vamano biryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam va panchayate tasya hetavaha. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused by these 5 factors. Purport. The words right and wrong are very significant in this verse. Okay, what's the verse? Nyayam and viparitam. Right work is work done in terms of the prescribed directions in the scriptures. And wrong work is work done against the principles of the scriptural injunctions. But whatever is done requires these 5 factors for its complete performance. Now, this is an important point here, is that, of course, you find you have the basic division, right and wrong, of what's in the scripture, what's out of the scripture. But we've also been reading, and this comes up in the Gita, right in the 2nd chapter, that there's part of the Vedas that describe all of these flowery words that take you to heaven, and it's karma kanda, and it's for those who are materially engrossed, but they're Vedic. They want to do the right thing. So there's leeway for that, because it's within the Vedas, and there's also some Vishnu worship there. There's mantras to Vishnu, but basically your motive is to really improve your material situation. So that's still right. It's not. It's karma. There's at one point, I think in the 4th chapter, karma, vikarma, and akarma. You remember that? It's important to understand those 3. Well, in that context, karma means fruit of activity within the Vedic paradigm. Vikarma means fruit of activity outside the Vedic paradigm. And then, sky's the limit. All of the horrible things that go on, the demonic activity, that's vikarma. And then akarma, which is what we're after, is activity that doesn't produce any result. In other words, it's selfless activity. And of course, the ideal in that is selfless service for Krishna. That doesn't produce any result. And then by working it, you come to the state of naishkarmya, meaning you're active like anything, but you're not getting any reaction. You're becoming progressively more liberated, which is what you want. So here, he's just talking right and wrong. We're back to the scripture. Remember, this has been a theme. The end of the 17th chapter, of the 16th chapter, I emphasize those 4 verses, where the last verse, tasmat shastra pramanam te, karya vivastito. Karya, we're talking about karma, we're talking about karta, and his karya is your duty, is to determine your evidence for what to do and what not to do. You should consult Shastra. And having consulted and understood, you should actually act according to those do's and don'ts as a matter of duty. Very important. And the very next verse, Arjuna asks, well, what about someone who discards Shastra, yakshastra vinamutsuja, and acts according to his own whims? Where is his faith? In other words, and we go into this whole thing of the different divisions of faith according to the modes of nature. And food and sacrifice and tapasya, different modes of nature. So the whole idea is that Shastra is the bottom line. If you want to know, Prabhupada talks about you have these 3 sources of knowledge: Guru, Shastra, Sadhu, right? And those are our pillars. But how do you know who's a guru and a sadhu? From Shastra. So the whole thing keys on Shastra. Even the definition of a guru, Shabde Parecha Nishnatam, he's very fixed in these two elements of Brahman, or the Shastra, Shabde, and the Pare means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and completely detached from material attraction. So, this is the definition. So, it all comes back down to the Shastra. That's the measure of all things. And Prabhupada worked so hard to give us this genuine Shastra as it is, and the Bhagavatam as it is, And so now he's defining, what is right and wrong. Significant right and wrong is done in terms of prescribed directions in the scriptures. But there's degrees of right and wrong. In other words, you can be basically right, but you're within the Vedic paradigm, but now there's further work to be done. What is the ultimate essence of the Vedas? That comes out in the Bhagavatam. The real Dharma is not just, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha means those are the four basic Vedic goals. You become religious, so you'll be prosperous. Doesn't it remind you of the Puritan ethic? Wasn't it like the Puritan ethic? It does in American history. You church every day, you're very upright, so that will prosper. We'll get the benefit. And it's come down now to prosperity theology, like if you're rich, that means you're good, you're a good person. If you're poor, you're not. That was Jesus' teaching, right? Yeah, right. So, but that's Dharma, that's kind of a Dharma. Now you're getting cheating religion, kicked out at the beginning of Bhagavatam. Actual Dharma is that which evokes pure devotion to Krishna. That's what we learn right in the second chapter of Bhagavatam, beginning of the book. And from there, what does that Dharma consist of? Primarily hearing and chanting about Krishna. So getting a taste for that produces ultimately realization of Krishna. You okay? Oh, that was the water bottle. Okay. This floor is a very noisy floor. You can push this down, and I'm moving my table, All right, let's go on. Tattaivam satikartaram atmanam kevalam tuyaha pashyat akata buddhitvan nata pashyati durmati. Therefore, one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the five factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. Purport. A foolish person cannot understand that the super soul is sitting as a friend within and conducting his actions. Although the material causes are the place, the worker, the endeavor, and the senses, the final cause is the Supreme, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should see not only the four material causes, but the supreme efficient cause as well. One who does not see the Supreme thinks himself to be the doer. So this is the famous, sarva karana karanam. We learned that at the beginning of this one, I think, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Not yet, And the last line says, Satchidananda Vigraha. Right? No. You don't know the one. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a different one. So this is the first verse of the Brahma Samhita, which is Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karana. We should know that line because every day when Maharaj ends his japa, he usually chants it on the way to putting this thing. Anadir Adir Govinda. No beginning, he's the beginning of all. And he's Govinda. In other words, this is wakes he's a coward boy, the whole thing. But then, Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes. When you think about it, everything that we see around us, it's the result of a chain of causes. Right? I mean, you start out with the raw rocks, and everything is brought together, And of course, the major cause is the intelligence of the builder, the one who made the blueprints for the building and the whole thing, So there's a whole bunch of causes that result in anything that we see, even our bodies, everything. When you take those causes back, each cause is an effect, you come to Krishna. He has no cause. It's always, and he has no beginning. He's the beginning of all. So, if one who thinks himself the only doer, this is ahankara, vimudhatma. You see, they think that they're the bewildered by ahankara vimudhatma, bewildered by this false ego, this false sense of self, which doesn't take into account the super soul or anything else. That's the illusion that's keeping us here. So. We have to refer always to the super soul And since we can't hear him directly, we hear him through the Guru and through the Shastra. All right, moving on. Yasya nahankrato bhavo buddhir yasya nalipyate hatvapi sahimalokan nahanti na nibadyate. One who is not motivated by false ego. Now this is very, now he's bringing it all home out to the battlefield here, because the whole point is he wants to get Arjuna to fight. One who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. Purport. In this verse, the Lord informs Arjuna that the desire not to fight arises from false ego. Arjuna thought himself to be the doer of action, but he did not consider the supreme sanction within and without. If one does not know that a super sanction is there, why should he act? But one who knows the instruments of work, himself as the worker and the Supreme Lord as the supreme sanctioner, is perfect in doing everything. Such a person is never in illusion. Personal activity and responsibility arise from false ego and godlessness. Personal activity and responsibility arise from godlessness or a lack of Krishna consciousness. Anyone who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Super Soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though killing does not kill, nor is he ever affected by the reaction of such killing. When a soldier kills on the command of a superior officer, he is not subject to be judged, but if a soldier kills on his own personal account, then he is certainly judged by a court of law. And so one of the great benefits of acting in this way, which is Krishna consciousness, is that the endeavor itself, the sincere endeavor, is success. In other words, just like Prabhupada, he came to America, or do you think of that lifetime of preparation in India? When you learn the history, it's amazing that he kept up his enthusiasm, He had this whole thing going in Jhansi, the League of Devotees. It seemed to be going. He was preaching, and he actually made a disciple, at least one, Acharya Prabhakar, But, by Krishna's arrangement, it didn't work out. I mean, you look a lot, in Prabhupada's life, all the things that kind of eventually impelled him to go to America. And you say, at the time, it was very painful. He writes this whole Bhagavad Gita, and the manuscript has disappeared. And I was reading the Lilamrita recently, and I had forgotten this, that he suspected that his family had destroyed it, because they were trying to get him to be, not do all this preaching, which is taking him away from the job and the family, But anyway, then there was, the famous falling out, the tea biscuits. His wife sold the Bhagavatam for tea biscuits. Tea or me, and she chose the tea, But what if she hadn't done that? What if she'd been a very supportive and active in preaching? Well, maybe he would have never even taken sannyas or, Pranaprastha. Or, So anyway, there were all of these setbacks, but Prabhupada had his inspiration from his guru, and he had Lord Chaitanya's prediction, and he had the facility to do it. He had, the intelligence and the writing ability. And so he persisted through all of these setbacks. And of course, when he came to, on the ship, he almost died, left his body. But of course he didn't. And so he was successful all along. It wasn't that he was a failure, then became a success at the end. Because the success in Krishna consciousness is the sincere effort in doing it. And Krishna's in charge, he's the ultimate doer, whether you're going to succeed in any given endeavor, But the fact is that if you continue to persevere in the basic practices of devotional service as well as whatever duty you're given, then you give Krishna, guides you this way and that way, and you come to a service or where you can really shine in that, whatever it is, and you become empowered, Krishna, because you're happy doing it. You're doing it for Krishna. It's your service, it's your offering. And so we've seen that over the years. I've seen as devotees develop in their services, they become empowered to do it. And so it's a different kind of endeavor, ultimately, because you see all of the material efforts. A few become very wealthy, very famous, and this and that. and so many people are just struggling to maintain, And the effort to do it is not the success. You become discouraged. I tried, and I couldn't do it, and like that. It's a whole different thing because you're doing it on your own account. You're doing it on your own account, or your close relationships. So this is this is a very stark statement here that one may kill, but doesn't kill. In other words, he's not responsible, just like the soldier on the, it's very appropriate, on the soldier of the battlefield. So this takes us back, remember, to the famous line in the 11th chapter, Nimitta matram bhavasabhyasachin, where Krishna says, you just be my instrument. Because he's already showing, part of the universal form is that Arjuna seeing all the soldiers on both sides getting killed, being chewed up in the jaws of this incredible universal form. He's scared. So there's nobody going back, The question is, if Arjuna is going to participate in it, do what Krishna wants, and be successful and be, enjoy the kingdom, or he's not going to do his duty. He's not going to save them by going off the battlefield, but by fighting, he'll please Krishna, and he'll feel well situated, and will not incur any karma at all, because it's Krishna's desire and it's Krishna's will. So this is how you can act without acting, without any result. And what is the result? Purification. Purification of the heart, where ultimately, because it comes to that point where you can't really do anything with the senses. Everyone else is going to face that point sooner or later. But you can still want to serve Krishna, and that's where the internal aspect comes in. And Krishna will accept that service in your mind, whatever you're giving ultimately, and you go back to God. So that's the final result of this. It's all the art of work. You remember this is Yoga Karma Kushalam or something like that. There's a verse in the 2nd chapter. The art of work, how to work in this world without being entangled and making it devotional service. The same, externally looks like the same thing you're doing, but you're sweeping the floor. Vijay is sweeping the floor every morning, but it's not the same. He's not a janitor, He's doing it as a service, as a glorious service, and there's the Lord watching, and everything. It's wonderful. So that mood can be applied to everything we do. All right, any questions, comments, discussion? This is a great section of the Bhagavad Gita. All right, text 18. We can do maybe one more here. Jnanam geyam parigyata Trivada karma chodana Kadanam karma karteti Trivada karma sangraha. Okay, now we're going to get some more divisions by the modes of nature here. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower are the three factors that motivate action. The senses, the work, and the doer are the three constituents of action. Purport. There are three kinds of impetus for daily work. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower. The instruments of work, the work itself, and the worker are called the constituents of work. Any work done by any human being has these elements. Before one acts, there is some impetus, which is called inspiration. Any solution arrived at before work is actualized is a subtle form of work. Then work takes the form of action. First, one has to undergo the psychological processes of thinking, feeling, and willing, and that is called impetus. The inspiration to work is the same if it comes from the scripture or from the instruction of the spiritual master. When the inspiration is there, now we would call this like motivation, or motive. The inspiration is there and the worker is there, then when the inspiration is there and the worker is there, then actual activity takes place by the help of the senses, including the mind, which is the center of all the senses. The sum total of all the constituents of an activity are called the accumulation of work. Now, one thing I was just thinking, this came to mind, those early days, it's so dramatic, the whole fate of, the enterprise is hanging by a thread, really. Prabhupada needs to inspire some people to help him, and he found that. And I'm thinking of Mukunda's, original Bhakta Michael Grant. how he was so instrumental there. He wandered up into that loft on the Bowery, It was attractive. Part of it was the music. He was a musician, which is important, the kirtan. And he was curious, to meet Prabhupada, and he met him. And then when it came, then there was that crisis where Prabhupada was living with this guy who went on a bad trip and was threatening Prabhupada. He had to run out of the loft and he had nowhere to go, ended up staying with one fellow, but that wasn't viable. And so the whole thing was, we got to get the Swami a place. And they all, pitched in. He knew the ins and outs of the village and the village voice and everything, and he went to, if you want to get a place, you get there first, get the first one hot off the press, and you get it. So he was able to help. And what motivated him? And what was the inspiration? Well, Prabhupada himself, you can say the motivation was Prabhupada, but it touched his heart. The idea is that the super soul inside was giving him the intelligence and the inspiration to do it, and he wanted to do it. It was a great act of devotion, and it was critical for the whole movement. So, so many things he had done up to that point, his music career and everything, his girlfriend, whatever, But that was like, the super soul telling me. And you can feel it when you do something like that, and it's a service that is successful. It definitely draws you closer. And gives you a taste which you then pursue if you're fortunate, and you start chanting and you get closer to Krishna. So that's what's being mentioned here. All of this thinking, feeling, willing. I remember when I first heard that, I said, "Yeah, that makes so much sense." Thinking, feeling, willing, is that if you're going to do something, you have to will to do it. And oftentimes you've thought something out, you've planned it, like that. But then you have to. But then there's a feeling, there's some kind of desire that you have to do something. You're just going to work, make some money, can pay the rent. But in Krishna consciousness, the feeling is really the end point. We're going. That feeling of love for Krishna is what you're working for. But that's not there at first. But by understanding the philosophy, you still will yourself to do what's necessary to do, whether it's chanting, getting up, doing this, and not doing things that you would ordinarily do. So you're really reforming your feeling, and what that comes from contact with Krishna, hearing the holy name, and actually working for Krishna. Even at first it's just a duty, but then Krishna responds to within the heart, and you feel the reciprocation. You feel that the connection, that there really is something there divine, and most obviously you can feel it in that you're becoming detached from things that you used to be involved in, that you even knew that, they were bad for you, but you're able to say no more, So that detachment, vairagya vidya, by knowledge you act in a certain way and you develop this vairagya, and that's very much involved in this chapter with this tyaga and renunciation. Giving it up is important, but more important than giving it up, literally, is giving up the desire for it. That's really what. Because it's being replaced with the wholesome desire for Krishna. So the more that we can do our duties in that with full consciousness, remembrance of Krishna, we'll develop that attachment to hearing and chanting, ruchi, which matures into actual attraction for Krishna and bhava and prema. And that's what we're after. Okay, it's 8:09. Time for our weekly verse, English verse. You ready? The sweetness of Sri Krishna's form beguiles. Now this is poetic license, because beguiles really cannot be an intransitive verb, but in this poem it is intransitive. It means that there's no direct object. In other words, you are beguiled by something. If you look it up, something beguiles you, but not that something beguiles. But poetic license. Yeah, I think you understand what it means. The sweetness of Sri Krishna's form beguiles. Still sweeter is his face, like autumn moon. But sweeter than the sweetest is his smile, whose luscious beauty makes the gopis swoon. Govinda's beauty captivates the doves, the swans, the deer, the cows, and every tree. Indeed, in Braja, every creature loves Sri Krishna and is drowned in ecstasy. That all-enchanting land is paradise, our home where we may dwell eternally. Most welcome there are those who pay the price to learn to love Sri Krishna perfectly. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.